or does not realize how little public understanding there is of its advances. The characterization of the mad scientist conducting terrifying experiments is a literary and film favorite from Frankenstein to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. The added sensationalism that can be introduced through today's media makes this genre all the more popular. In the past, engineers and scientists achieved star status. Even today, their names evoke their triumphs. Isambard Kingdom Brunel, Gustave Eiffel, Michael Faraday, Thomas Edison, Guglielmo Marconi. Of course, they suffered the same rejection as technology does today, but their achievements were visible and stirred people's imagination and contributed immeasurably to human progress. I think the last engineering adventure that truly caught the public's imagination was probably the moon landings. But it is not as if there is no material to capture the imagination today. Advances in medicine, electronics, computing, communications, just to name four, are every bit as exciting as what went before, even if they are less visible and more complex to understand. My company is still successful in hiring engineers despite our proximity to what is seen as an environmentally unfriendly industry, because we can capture their imagination with technology. Of course, it's not enough. People have concerns over the impact of what we do that have to be answered. But the adventure in science and engineering remains the same. We live in an age of information, and therefore information about how we treat our planet, its natural resource endowment, and the growing gap between rich and poor are ever more widespread. The generation of children being educated today have more information about these matters and a more global view than any generation that has gone before. I would argue that as a result of this, it is more important than ever to teach them the possibilities that science and technology offer to help solve these problems. The contribution of economic growth to improvement in the human condition means there's no going back. The populations of China and India will be sensitive to arguments about the environment, but not to the point that they will slow their economic growth to accommodate our concerns. In China alone, there are at least today 24 nuclear plants under construction, with 84 units planned or proposed. And in 2006, China expanded its new power generation capacity by 102 gigawatts, an amount roughly equal to the entire capacity of the United Kingdom and Thailand combined. Similar expansion has happened in 2007, and almost 90% of the new plants are powered by coal. This sort of policy would be unthinkable in the United States or Western Europe. Our role, through industry and education, is to ensure that in implementing its energy strategy, China uses mitigating technologies for safe waste disposal of nuclear fuel and CO2 emissions, and they use energy with the intelligence gathered from our mistakes. Above all, we need to educate growing generations that a return to the past, an abandonment of economic growth for the sake of mitigating some of the negative effects of industrialization, are not realistic propositions. But this requires that we give science and engineering a much better understood role in society. And this will only be achieved if scientists and engineers thoroughly understand that role themselves. Students entering the fields of science and engineering today must learn the skills required to behave as ethical managers and decision makers, as leaders who act based on a sensitive global perspective on the environmental and social impact of their endeavors. They must learn to recognize and honor their responsibilities towards a wider audience, towards the communities impacted by the activities of business and industry. In an age where people can learn at the click of a mouse about almost any subject they choose, students entering the scientific and engineering community must be given the skills necessary to communicate what they do to a broad audience. Active lobbying on the basis of scientific evidence, often exaggerated for effect, has become a common tactic to win political advantage. Responsible science and engineering needs to be better able to communicate its positions in the media, less august than papers from societies like the Petroleum SPE. And what is the role of the energy industry? When you recruit as many engineers as my company does, you cannot go to campus without a clear position on what your company feels is its role in society. It is also important that you maintain a position that you can demonstrably support, as youth is notoriously intolerant of positions that are contradictory and which are not practiced. We believe that to recruit on campus today, when you represent a company that is involved in the oil and gas business, you have to be upfront with your position on a certain number of issues. The first is that you must explain the important role that energy has played, is playing, and will play in lifting millions of people out of poverty and increasing living standards worldwide. Energy is the first building block in almost everything we undertake. Secondly, as most authoritative studies have pointed out, fossil fuel energy will remain dominant in the energy mix for at least another 50 years. In fact, as the recent National Petroleum Council study pointed out, all sources of energy, as well as energy conservation, are going to be necessary to satisfy the world's needs. The notion that oil and gas is a twilight industry will not stand up in front of an intelligent analysis. In addition, as we extract the next trillion barrels, the role of science and engineering will grow dramatically. Deep, harsh environments, poor and more remote resources, improved recovery rates will all add to the challenges. Thirdly, it is essential to have a reasoned position in the environmental debate. We believe that as a company, we can make real contributions to certain global issues that fall within our skill set. We can contribute to the evolution of technology for the capture and storage of CO2 emissions to mitigate the probabilities of climate change effects, and we are active in both research and development and scale experimentation in these fields. We consider that this may well become a considerable business for Schlumberger, and we already have a separate carbon services division. Fourthly, it is important to have a position on the company's social responsibility. At Schlumberger, we call this global citizenship. We work in some of the poorest and most underprivileged countries in the world. Our employees want to contribute what they can, and we have therefore structured programs around matters where we feel that we can make a genuine contribution. We have a contribution to make as an employer and contractor in the areas of malaria prevention, HIV/AIDS prevention, defensive driving, and we are increasingly sharing our experience in managing these issues with the communities in which we live and work. Above all, we feel that we can contribute in developing countries to the development of scientific education, which we do through our Schlumberger Excellence in Educational Development Program, or SEED, where we connect underprivileged schools to the internet and provide science learning and practical experiences, as well as forums for teachers and students to meet. The SEED School Network Program currently involves 195 schools, serving more than 230,000 children in 38 different countries. We also maintain the scholarship program called Faculty for the Future, whereby we support women academics from developing countries. To date, this program has supported 67 women from 27 countries. Finally, we find that it is important to explain to students the importance we attach in our company to ethics in a broad sense. This is not just about our industry's reputation for corruption. It's about our values. Perhaps the best way to explain this is to tell you that anybody who joins Schlumberger will, in their first week of training, be taught 4 courses. Firstly, how to navigate our IT system and find the relevant information. Secondly, what are the company's values? Thirdly, basic safety training and what we expect from our employees in the area of safety. And finally, what are our ethical policies and how we expect our employees to practice them. All a long way from engineering, but essential matters for somebody embarking on a career in oil and gas. These programs, together with the excitement of technology, help us to attract the best. But we still have to compete with all the other institutions who are seeking to recruit engineers. For me, as somebody who trained in finance, there is nothing more frustrating than to learn that the top competition for engineering graduates are investment banks or accounting firms. I consider this to be educational based on a grand scale. But if we're to combat it, one other consideration needs to be taken into account. Not only must we communicate the excitement of the careers that exist, but we must also compete with the material awards that are available from financial institutions. Luckily, the demand for engineers in the state of credit markets is such that the situation is rapidly correcting itself. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you the best of luck with your future careers. Thank you.